Okay, so man, so you are now a Cisco AI specialist or an AI specialist, but you've been making a lot of content on YouTube more related with security, cybersecurity. If you could take us to the beginning of your journey, how did you start it?
So yeah, so my starting point was definitely not planned. So when I first decided to get into cybersecurity, I was at a point where I honestly didn't know what I really wanted to do. All I knew was that I was in a position without a job, no real prospects, and I really wanted to do something that would stick. And I took some time out. I remember exactly where I was as well when I was doing this, and I was sat in one of my old houses, and I was thinking about, what is it really that I am good at? Not something that I wanted to do, but what am I actually good at? And one thing that kept coming back to me was the fact that family members would always reach out to me and ask for me to support them with maybe setting up a new PC or a new tablet or a new phone. And it was always technical, so that stood out to me. And then the other thing that stood out to me was the fact that I was always coming back to, being on a computer. I'd built a computer in my early days and I just like technology. So for me, it was like, okay, I think I should do something related to technology. And so that got me thinking. And at this point, I'd already been to college, I'd studied and got my media qualifications at the time. So because my original idea was to, which is kind of ironic now actually, was to actually do something related to broadcast and television and things like that. So with the camera and stuff like that. And it's kind of ironic I say that because now I do a lot of content creation and I've been doing that for many years. So it's kind of, I guess, subconsciously come into play. And so I'd already had that, and then when I was thinking about the technology, I was like, okay, so how do I get into a position where I can get a job that can obviously support me and my family, and it's related to technology. At the time, it was we're going back like probably close to 15 years maybe now, so quite a while ago. But at the time, a lot of a lot of technical jobs were really focused on degrees. The barrier to entry to a technical job was to have a degree. So I kind of started thinking, maybe I need to try and get to university and maybe do a course, a technical course, and then go from there. And those that have sort of known me growing up know that I wasn't really the best student in school. Let's put it that way. I never really liked following, I guess, a particular route. I like to do what I wanted to do, and so education wasn't really a strong point for me. So I got to a point where I was like, I'm not too sure about this university thing. I don't know if that will work out for me. But then I was sort of stuck because I knew that I'd really need to get some sort of qualification to get a job. But then I didn't really at the time want to go to university. So I kind of just bit the bullet, as you call it, and looked at a few courses related to technology, and applied to a course, a university degree. So it was an undergraduate degree at my local university, well, college, but they do university degrees. Applied and yeah, got to go for an interview, met the lecturers. They told me all about the course, and it's funny actually now looking back, because when I went for that interview, I thought I knew about technology.
Mm.
And then when I was sat in the interview with the lecturers, I left the interview thinking, damn, I don't know about technology. And the reason I say that is because, the course had such a high bar. It was the followed the sort of 70% and above is a pass.
Hmm.
Anything below is a fail. And to me at that time, it was like, wow, that's a pretty high standard. And they were talking about Microsoft. They were talking about Cisco. They were asking me what I knew about technology, and they were saying, do you know what a router is? Do you know what a switch is? And I didn't even know really what a switch was. I didn't really know what a router was at the time. So for me, it was like, wow, I don't know if this is going to be the right course. So I left the interview and then kind of decided just to go ahead with it and see sort of what would happen. And I originally applied for the course as part time because I needed to still work in some capacity to support my family and stuff. The course lecturers got back to me, and after I applied, I managed to get onto the course. And then after the first day of turning up for what's called induction, I decided to change to full time based on sort of what I was seeing and the people that were on the course as well. And yeah, I just wanted to sort of, I figured that I knew it would be difficult, a 3-year degree, doing it full time, having to support a family and work as well. But I just knew it was the right thing to do because at the time it was either do the degree in 3 years
Hmm.
or do it part time and take 6 years. And I thought,
Oh.
yeah, I don't know what I don't really want to do that. So I took the full time opportunity and decided that I would try and work around that as well as being able to meet the deliverables of the degree as well. And it was difficult. The 3 years were difficult. The first year was a big shock because I'd been out of education for a while. I'd never done sort of university level, so the whole referencing and requirements to meet deadlines wasn't really something that I was familiar with. So when I started to get all that sort of information, it was pretty daunting, to say the least. I stuck with it and managed to, after the first year, the feedback that I got was great. The grades that I got was great, and I kind of just said to myself, this is clearly something for me because if it wasn't, then I wouldn't be excelling right now. So the years went by, and long story short, I managed to graduate with a first class honors degree in computer networks and system support, and actually get one of the highest grades that they've ever had on the actual course itself. Um, so it just showed that great determination and willingness just sort of
Hmm.
got me through, and the ability to understand and learn what seemed to be well, it's still a difficult subject, but when it just showed that if I put my effort into it, then I
Yeah.
could actually learn these complex tasks. So yeah, I did that, and after graduating, I started a network security engineer role with a local MSSP, and I think
So
that
for
last.
clarity, what is an MSSP?
So it's a managed security service provider. So basically, they offer support to other businesses out there, typically focused on security support. But a lot of MSSPs, especially back then, they came from more of a managed service provider company perspective, which was basically more focused on just providing support for any technical equipment that a business may have. And then we sort of saw a transition to, security got more important. We saw a transition to adding that extra S, which is the security, to show that they're specialized in security. So yeah, MSSPs just really focus on providing security support or support to organizations with security solutions. But it's not just security; they basically do it all,
Okay.
essentially.
So okay, you started this role. What happened next?
Yeah, so I graduated from university. I started as a network security engineer at this local MSSP, and It was a good start. I mean, the salary was fairly decent as a graduate to start. I managed to negotiate a fairly good salary. At the time, I only had my CCENT, which was the Cisco certified entry networking
Something.
technician, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
at the time, it basically half of a CCNA at the time, and I managed to sort of use that as I guess, a bargaining tool to show that I'm working towards my CCNA, which is a very valuable certification, especially for entry level networking positions. And yeah, I negotiated a good salary. I started with this company and started to learn a ton of stuff, and not just working with Cisco, but I was working with Palo Alto. I was working with Checkpoint. I was working with quite a few different vendors, so that my sort of learning curve was like that, because I'd sort of gone from really just knowing about Cisco and Microsoft throughout my degree, or at least working with those technologies, predominantly Cisco, to having to now support customers with solutions that I've never really heard of or touched as well. But it was good. It was a good learning journey because I had a lab environment. I could learn new solutions, which was great, and that sort of helped me excel. But that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I always had the mindset throughout. I'd got so engrossed in Cisco technology and the way that Cisco did things. I went through the NetAcad courses and things like that, and a lot of my degree was predominantly, as I said, focused on Cisco. So when I graduated, the only thing that I really wanted to do was to work for Cisco. And I knew how difficult that would be. Everybody was saying, you have to be great to work at this company. Cisco, like, these people are just brainiacs. Like, there were nothing but like crazy good stuff coming out about Cisco, and I thought, wow, I want to be one of those people. And I sort of just had this crazy mindset, like, everyone's saying, nah, you need to sort of have, a few years experience maybe,
Hmm.
and then at least try to apply. And then the interview process is going to be crazy as well. And in fact, I already had an idea of how difficult the interview process could potentially be, because in my second year of doing my degree, I
Mm.
actually applied for a role at Cisco Meraki.
Mm.
Again, just had my CCENT. I had the knowledge that I was learning throughout university. And the idea was that, even though I was in my second year, the idea was that I would apply for this position and then somehow manage to land the job once I finished my degree. And I got a telephone interview. I managed to pass that. I then got invited down to London to the Cisco Meraki office at the time for an interview, and that was about maybe 3 or 4 hours interview, and it was half technical and half, I guess, not technical. And that was a huge wake up call for me, because it was like, wow, like, this is like what they're looking for. And I didn't end up getting the job anyway. But the point, I say all that to say that I had this mindset already that probably now crazy these interviews are going to be to get into a company like Cisco, and sort of doubted myself somewhat, because you got all these people saying, you know, these people are crazy smart. It's going to be difficult to get into a company like this, especially as a graduate. But I kind of just bet on myself, like I did when I started my degree, and I just said to myself, whatever I do, I'm going to get a position at Cisco. And 3 months into my MSSP role, I'd actually applied for it was a contracting role, or it was a training position to learn about Cisco security technologies, with the view of, after 6 months, you would then get a full-time role with Cisco. So I saw this position. The position was based down south, in a place called Reading near London. Excuse me. And I live, bearing in mind, probably about 4 hours away from this location. I didn't know how I was going to do it. The role itself, once completed, would mean that I would, at the time, move to Belgium. I'd have to move to Belgium. I'd have to speak French somewhat, and I didn't know how I was going to do any of this, but I just like, this is my opportunity. Something just stood out to me about this, and I just like, I need to do this. And so 3 months into this position, I applied for this role. I managed to get a telephone interview, and I remember I actually went outside of the company I was working for lunch, and I sat in my car and I did this telephone interview, and yeah, it was fairly straightforward. And after that, I got an email to basically say, yes, we want you to go for another interview. And this interview was then with a at the time, who I actually ended up working on this person's team in the end, but it was an interview then with somebody from Cisco, as
Mhm.
consultant from Cisco. And that's when the sort of ball dropped to like, oh, here we go again. It's going to be, the difficult questions, and am I going to be able to do this? And again, I just bet on myself and said, I've got nothing to lose really. And so again, I did this interview in my car with this Cisco engineer at the time. Very knowledgeable, I would say. He's actually written books and everything. And I recall getting a call back, and it was just nothing but positive feedback, basically saying you need to hire this guy. And when I
Okay.
got told that, I was just like, wow, is that talking about me? It was crazy. I then got this opportunity to start this position, and it was a graduate position, like I say, 6 months training on security products, Cisco security products, with the view of that each graduate would be assigned to different locations within Cisco. Mine was going to be Belgium because somebody had already been chosen to work in the UK. Again, I had no idea how I was going to do this, but I wanted to just see what happened.
Yeah, you are up to the challenge.
Yeah, exactly. So I got this job. Every Sunday. I would drive 4 hours to Reading, and I would live in a shared accommodation, basically a room, just so that I could do this role, just so I could go into the office and do this role. This is how much I wanted this position. So I'd drive 4 hours every Sunday. I would live in basically a bedroom with a bed and maybe a bedside cabinet, and that's pretty much it. And I would go into work Monday to Friday, and then every Friday I would drive from Reading back 4 hours to where I live, and I'd do that for 6 months every single week. And it was difficult, but I just knew that I needed to do this. And so
You had
I
to pay the
recall,
price.
yeah, I had to. And I've always had the mindset of, through difficult times comes great things. And I always knew that, through the dark times, that they had to be a good time. They had to be a time where, things would just turn. And I thought that would be at the end of 6 months. Cisco put me on courses to go to college to learn French. I was absolutely horrible at doing that. I just cannot do it at all. So
Tu
that
ne pas
was,
parler français?
I
Come
don't know
on.
what you're saying.
C'est
No, I just honestly, I just could not get to grips with it. And so that was one of my worries as well. How am I going to do this? How am I going to finish this 6 months and go to Belgium and be expected to speak some sort of French to some French speaking customers? Anyway, that was a topic for another day. We got to this end of the 6 months, so we were coming up to the end of the 6 months. It was December, just before Christmas, festive time, getting ready for Christmas, getting ready just to have a break, and then looking forward to the new year, because I knew then if I'd sort of met all the targets, then, I potentially got a life changing role here. And I recall being on the Isle of Man, and I was delivering, along with the other graduates, I was delivering security presentations to businesses on the Isle of Man. It was a great day. We delivered to businesses, and at the end of it, we were sat in a room, and the leadership at the time came in, and don't get me wrong, you got to remember this position was a what Cisco call a red badge, so it was like a contractor position. Basically, not a full-time employee of Cisco, but you sort of getting paid by Cisco as a contractor essentially. And we were all sat in a room, and the leadership came in and basically told us that Cisco are having to let go of some people, essentially red badges, not just us, but other red badges that were also working on behalf of Cisco. And it was just an awful time. There was, graduates that, like me, wanted so much to work for Cisco. There were, guys crying. You know, I when I heard the news, he was very upset. The fact that I've sort of just gone through this 6 months of training, I'd left my other position to give this a shot, and I'd basically done everything that I've done, all the traveling and everything, just to get to this point for him to say, "Yeah, we no longer." Are going to take you guys forward. It honestly was heartbreaking at the time. And for me, I wasn't about to give up. I just couldn't give up. I just thought there must be a way for me to stay at this company. And it was funny because they sort of kept a record of the high achievers, the people that were doing really well on throughout the course somewhat. And a few of us were actually offered positions to carry on with Cisco, but doing it via a different route. So, and I were one of these people. Now, there was a catch again, and the catch for the guys that were staying or who Cisco really wanted to stay was that we would have to do another 6 months security training. And on top of that, we would now need to move to Poland and carry out this training. And for me, it was like, wow, like I've literally just got to the end of these 6 months. I broke my back to sort of get to this point. And now I need to go do another 6 months of training if I want the position, and do it in a different country that I know nothing about. So at the time it was, and to top it off, we only had 24 hours to decide. And well, I'd say less than 24 hours actually, because by the time this sort of news got broke, it was already the evening and they needed a response by the next day. So I literally spent the night awake in my hotel room thinking about the pros and the cons, and thinking about, how things could potentially change if I did or didn't accept the position essentially. At the time, my partner at the time was absolutely against it and said, "No, don't do it." We had a lengthy conversation on the phone. After I got off the phone, I just sat there just thinking about things, and the person I am said, "I don't care, I'm going to do it." And a bit selfish it may seem, but I just knew, I had a vision, and I just knew that I needed to do this. And the very next day, I spoke to the team and I said, "Yes, I'll accept it." I didn't know what was going to happen, how it was going to happen, and the logistics. I didn't know anything. Anyway, my partner at the time, I got back to the UK, literally said that I'd accepted it. Obviously, it wasn't met with a smile, and we got through that point anyway. And this was December. By March, the end of March, maybe start of April, I was in Poland, living in Krakow. So it was like 3 months from then. It was just like a total different life again. And then yeah,
During this program, were you getting paid somehow?
yeah. So it was a paid position. It was similar to what I was getting paid for my graduate salary when I
Mm-hmm.
had the position at the MSSP.
Okay.
So it kind of made it easier to obviously take that. But yeah, it was a paid position.
Yeah, because I don't see myself like 6 months. It's probably but like 1 year just studying.
Absolutely, and it were good. It were good. I think I was in a pretty unique position compared to a lot of the other graduates, and I say that because at the time, a lot. I went to university a lot later in life because I did a lot of other things before I decided to ever get to that stage.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I sort of was at a graduate level, I was somewhat aligned or somewhat with, you know, I guess a lot of younger people. Not
Mm.
so much younger, but I'd say maybe 5 to maybe even 10 years younger sometimes than me. And with that came obviously different responsibilities. A lot of these guys still maybe lived at home, didn't have any, responsibilities outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
I had, I had a daughter already. I had a partner already. So I had bills to pay. I had food to put on the table. I had a roof to keep over, my family's heads. So for me, the pay was important. It was very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And when we got to that end of the 6 months initially, and we were told basically we got no job. It was like, man, like where's the next paycheck going to come from? So for me, it was a relief to I guess accept that position and go to Poland. But that didn't make it any easier, because when we went to Poland, we would then get paid in the Polish currency,
Mm.
which is a lot less than the UK currency. And then again, I still had a roof to keep over my family's head. I still had food to put on the table, and I still had to support myself in Poland. So it was difficult, and I had to do that for another 6 months. Yeah, it was crazy.
So you were there in Poland. So but you were at accommodation arranged by Cisco, or you were by yourself?
Yeah, so fortunately, which made it a little bit easier, Cisco had arranged the accommodation. I got a brand new apartment in Krakow. It was a really nice apartment. Really enjoyed my time there. So much so, I still to this day say I could actually live in Krakow. I loved Poland. I loved the place. And yeah, the apartment was new. Cisco paid for all of that: the internet, the gas,
Okay,
the electric,
logistics. Oh,
everything.
yeah. Okay.
The only thing that I had to do was pay for my food, essentially,
Okay.
to
Yeah.
live.
Okay.
So that made it easier for me to be able to get a salary and send, I guess, most of it back to the UK throughout
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. Well, it was. I would say that the heavy lifting was the logistics in Poland, and because if you don't have to pay like electricity, communication, these kind of things, like food, or you can just eat once per day, and you're good to go.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the bonus was that the Cisco office from my apartment was only, was it about 20, I'd say 30 minutes max walking. I don't even think it was that long, but I managed to get myself a bicycle while I was
Mm,
there to make it easier.
yeah.
Most times I would walk, especially in the summer. It was, just a nice walk. So what made it easy was the fact that I didn't need to pay for traveling to get to the office and back every single day as well.
Okay. One thing that I want to highlight is that during this time, you're doing this training, and you were already a YouTuber. Because
Absolutely,
part
yeah.
part of this journey of yours you were sharing on your YouTube channel, which I watched back then. So let's say that you already had like two roles,
Hmm.
like getting this training, cybersecurity, plus making content as a YouTuber, which we are very thankful because that's how I learned about this program. I didn't know. Oh, Cisco has this in Poland. I said, okay, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
uh, yeah, but this is just something that folks who think like, oh, I don't have time to do this thing. I don't have time to do this kind of thing. Actually, you have time. You just have to know how to manage it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely all about management. And if you get that right, it makes things not easier, but it makes things manageable. I mean, you have
Hmm.
to remember when I was doing my degree, it was a full-time degree. I still worked at the same time, part-time throughout those 3 years, and still managed to become one of the highest that ever scored on that degree as well, with a first class honors. I was also doing my YouTube channel as well. I also had a family as well, so it's definitely doable. It's not easy, but if you really want something, there's ways to make it work. And you just need to find those ways. You need to find a way to manage your time and do really what's most important to you. And sometimes that involves being selfish. being selfish to achieve what you need to achieve. And when I say that, I mean, it means, maybe saying no to going out with, friends on an evening or a weekend. It may be a no, unfortunately, spending time with, your family. But, if you can sort of do that and get to a point where I guess the grass is greener, that's where you can sort of get that time back essentially. And what I will say is that when I started my 6 months in Poland, my intentions were still the same. So even though I had a new set of graduates, getting
Hmm.
to know them, we did have socializing time and stuff like that. And that was amazing. But what I did different to a lot of those, and probably a lot of many others that, would maybe go through the same situation, was I would go to work at the Cisco office all day. I would then come back to my apartment, and then every single day without fail, I would work on studying for a certification without fail, even on a Saturday, even on a Sunday. And I had my method so much down to a T that I literally didn't even need to think about what I was doing. And to some, it may seem boring, it may seem laborious, and it may seem like a lot. But within that 6 months in Poland, I managed to go from just having a CCNA to getting my CCMP, routing and switching at the time it was called, is now
Hmm.
called Enterprise. I got my CCMP, I got my CCNA Security, which is now retired. I
Hmm.
got my CCDA,
That's the
and bearing
design
in
one.
mind the CCMP was 3 exams. You had to take 3 exams before you even got the certification. So in 6 months, I managed to go from an associate level to a professional level with a bunch of Cisco certifications that I passed first time because I was just dedicated to the outcome, the goal. And my goal was to prove that I have the ability to do this and to land this role after the 6 months with Cisco. And I think one other thing that I'll point out as well, the benefit for me on also taking this role and going to Poland was that there was no longer the requirement for me when I finished to then go to Belgium. I could then return to the UK and work in the UK and I security team at Cisco as well. So that was even more appealing as well.
So you were not just looking at the training, but also how am I going to be at the end of this training? Which skills? How's going to be my value in the market, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and because the role wasn't guaranteed. The role was you've got to do 6 months, and then we'll sort of assess you
Probably.
throughout and see what happens. You may not be the candidate for us, and
Yeah.
the role's terminated. You may be good enough, and we may decide to keep you. So for me, it was all about trying to get the most out, and to do that, I had to put my all in to do that. Also, what I will say on the side of sort of going to work all day, it was, that process of actually working all day it was a lot because you've got to remember I've gone from a graduate to not really knowing all these technologies and how they work in detail to sitting through these trainings in classes within the work environment Monday to Friday, just being drilled into to me about all these Cisco technologies, how they work in greater detail, how protocols work, VPNs, and security is a complex topic, and to sort of grasp all that within 6 months with all Cisco security technologies that they have, it was a lot. So to do that and then to come back to my apartment and then to study, say from 6 p.m., make food, do whatever I need to do, washing my clothes, whatever I need to do all that and study until midnight every night and then get up and go to work and repeat the same thing again. It was a lot, but I just knew that if I worked hard, it'd pay off.
You did invest in yourself, essentially what you're
Absolutely.
saying.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what happened after these 6 months prior? That's when you decided to start an
Yeah.
entrepreneurship.
So after the 6 months, again got good feedback. I'd got all those certifications, and I was offered the position in the UK. So I was offered a position as a consultant, security consultant engineer, covering UK and Ireland customers, and that was music to my ears because it meant I could come back to the UK, I could work remotely and support these customers while working for my dream company essentially. So I got back to the UK. I worked for 5 years in that role as a security network consultant, or it was called NCE at the time, and network consultant engineer in a security capacity. And so I did that for 5 years. Throughout those 5 years, continued with certifications, getting all my certifications. I got my CCMP security. I had this view by the time I'd finished doing all the training. And, as we spoke before, my sort of idea was that if I do the training on something, I want to see if I can get the certification. So my view was to get the CCMP security. I'd already had the CCNA security, so the natural progression was then to professional level. And then after that, my ideal next stop was then going to be the CCIE security. So my idea was that while I was working in the role on these technologies, I'd get more familiar with the technologies, I'd understand them more, I'd get more
Mm.
experience, and that would make it a little bit easier for me to sort of get to that level. We all know Cisco exams are not easy, but that's another story. So I did that for 5 years, and I wanted a change. I decided I wanted a change within the company. And the great thing about Cisco and large corporations like Cisco is that you have the ability to move laterally within the company. If you want to try something new, you can do that. You don't have to look outside
Mm.
elsewhere, unless you want to, of course. And for me, I saw a role with Cisco Duo at the time. So Duo recently at the time, maybe a few years into being acquired by Cisco, but still very much still doing their own thing. And the difference with the role that I was doing to the Duo role was that the Duo role was more pre-sales. So it was still technical, but it was technical pre-sales.
Okay.
The role that I was doing as an NCE was just purely technical. So that was going to be a change for me because, I somewhat done sales in my previous life prior to getting into technical side of things, but not technical sales. And I didn't know that what that would look like. But anyway, went for the interview, got through the process, and managed to get that role, and really enjoyed it. It allowed me to sort of go from specializing, sorry, from being more of a generalist in
Mm.
security technologies, having to know all the security portfolio, to being able to just focus on Cisco Duo and specialize in Cisco Duo. And that was really good. Continued obviously my YouTube channel, put a lot of content out there
Mm.
around Duo as well. And it got to, I think I did around 2.5 years in that role. And then unfortunately, Cisco decided that they want to start laying people off and getting rid of teams that were no longer really needed, essentially. And at the time, I was actually in Las Vegas at a sales conference for Cisco when I sort of got wind of what was going on, and it just killed off my whole experience. But I got back to the UK, and my old team was basically notified that we're gonna be letting you guys go. So I'd never. It was a big shock because I'd never been in that position before, like like that. I'm somebody who was consistently getting good feedback, doing good work. I have all these certifications. I have my degree. At the time, in fact, I was also I was also doing my master's degree, and actually ended up getting my master's degree as well. So that's another thing I was doing. I did a full-time master's degree while working full-time at Cisco as well, and I got a distinction in that. So I had all these credentials and qualifications and work experience, and I was just like, wow, like how can they let people like me and others like me, or others that are even better than me,
Mm-hmm.
how could they let us go? And that's when my whole mindset just shifted from sort of thinking that if I worked so hard and got to, I guess, the point that I got to, that I would be somewhat untouchable as long as I carried on being great, to it doesn't really matter. So my mindset shifted from thinking that, as long as I do good work, I've got these qualifications, certifications, experience, I'm set, to it doesn't matter. I really need to really have a plan B just in case, or make sure that if that time does come, I have the experience, the knowledge, the certifications, whatever it may be,
Mm-hmm.
and connections to basically go and get another role, essentially. Fortunately for me, throughout this time, I'd built up a good connection within Cisco with peers, and I started reaching out to people. I started looking on the jobs portal to see if there's any roles that I could potentially be a good fit for. And it was frantic. It was a big panic because I've gone from being safe to, in a month I may not have a job. I need to now think about scaling things back, at home, paying the bills, things like that. And while still trying to secure another role and prove myself again to potentially another company that knows nothing about me. And it honestly killed a little bit inside of me because I had this, I guess, dream to kind of dedicate my working professional technical career to Cisco, because I just wanted to work for this company so much. There's a lot that I value about Cisco, the ethics, the people, the things that they do. I just love the technology. There's a lot that I like. So for me, it was like, I'm not ready to leave this company. And again, my mindset, I guess, shifted to the way that I was when I was trying to cram all this in to work for Cisco. I sort of went back to that, to, I need to do something to stay in this company. I don't want to leave this company. I feel like my time has not yet been served yet. And so I reached out to a lot of people internally, spoke with a few people, a few leads led to dead ends essentially. And I essentially just saw a job on the jobs portal that I thought, this is probably a good fit, something a little bit different, but still technical. And it was for a technical, basically same role that I was doing at the time, so technical solutions architect, security focused, but basically supporting renewals, so helping to renew customers who have Cisco solutions.
Okay.
And so I applied for this role, and I honestly I didn't know how it was going to go, because there's also a lot of other people in Cisco also frantically looking for jobs because they want to stay at the company. So there's going to be a lot of competition. We're not just talking about outside competition, we're talking about equally qualified, maybe even better qualified individuals in Cisco. People that work for Cisco have something about them. They're, really qualified. They're really good at what they do. And, you never know who you're really up against. And I went through the process. I did all I think 3 or 4 rounds of interviews, even though I'm already in the company. It's like, wow, like this is crazy. So I did all these interviews, and I also realized, as I said, I kind of didn't bet all my cards on Cisco, so I was looking externally as well. I also did some interviews externally, and I also started to look at contracting roles. And it was funny. I did an interview for a contracting role, and within 10 minutes of getting off the phone, they offered me the position. They said, "Yeah, we want you to work, for us." And and they needed a decision actually pretty sharpish. And I said to them, because I was also going through this interview with Cisco internally, but I didn't tell them that. But I said, can you give me until the end of the day to make a decision? And the reason I said that was because I really wanted to find out if I'd got this job at Cisco. And the team that was deciding was US based. So a lot of the team was based in the US. So by the time I was sort of logging off in the UK, these guys were coming online.
Mhm.
And it got to 5:30 p.m. and I think I were a week away from finishing Cisco because my role is no
Yeah.
longer required. So everything were on the line. And I've got this company ringing me back trying to get an answer at 5:30. I'm trying to sort of put that off. I'm messaging people internally to say, do we know anything? And it was crazy. And then I think at must have been about 5:45 in the evening. A recruiter in Cisco called me internally and said, "Give me all the feedback, the good feedback." Said it were very, very tense because there were obviously other people within Cisco applying as well. Uh, but you've been selected. We want to give you the position. So it was just like a big relief. I was just like, yes, I'll take it. I'll take it because
Thank you.
for me, it was like nothing changes because yes, it's a new role. I'm ingrained within Cisco. Like
Yeah.
I'm know Cisco's inner workings, outer workings. It's part of me. So
Yeah.
it almost felt like if I left the company, I was sort of like leaving a part of me in the business to
Mm.
start again somewhere else. And I wasn't ready to do that. So I accepted the position and then straight away I reached out to the other company and just said, look, I appreciate it. I said, thank you. But I've decided that I'm going to stay with the company that I work for and take on this new role. And they understood and said all the best. And yeah, to this day, I'm still doing that role now.
Okay, man. That's great. So
Crazy story.
that's a crazy one. At what time? So you mentioned about the professional certifications,
Hmm.
and based on your LinkedIn profile, you were taking not only Cisco certifications, you have
Yep,
also from other vendors.
correct.
Why?
So again, I never really looked outside of Cisco because I was so ingrained and immersed with the whole Cisco ecosystem until I got to the CCIE stage. So I trained and studied and labbed and everything else you do to get to the CCIE level. Obviously, I've got all these years of experience now within Cisco working solely on security solutions, 8 years maybe of experience now within Cisco. I'm now coming up to 10 years, I think now. But at the time, it was around, 6, 7 years experience working with Cisco security products. And I thought now would be a good time to try and get my CCIE security. Obviously, CCIE in general is, it's world renowned. It's the certification to get. And I wanted to be a part of that club. And I worked hard, I studied hard, and I booked my first lab attempt it was in Krakow. It was at the Cisco office where I actually used to work. So I went back to, I guess, my second home
Hello,
to
darkness, my
take
old friend.
yeah, to take my first attempt at the CCIE security lab. And what's so funny is that the room where I did my CCIE lab was actually in a room where I used to spend a lot of my time doing the studying when I lived there. So it was just everything just came back to me. It was just
Hmm.
crazy. Anyway, got to my CCIE lab. Obviously, it's 8 hours. You get a break in between. And the very first time that I did it, I didn't intend to pass anyway. I just wanted to go. I wanted to get a feel for the exam because I knew it was going to be difficult, regardless of the experience and the knowledge on the products because the time factor, the nerves, everything just sort of makes it a lot more difficult. But I wanted to understand, I wanted to see what it's like, I wanted to experience it. And so I did 8 hours, I went through and configured things that I knew I could do. And, at the end, I got fail. And I wasn't bothered because I never intended to go and pass. And it was just a way for me to, I guess, ease my nerves a little bit for the next time and to
Mm.
know what I'm going into the next time. And plus, I had that sort of knowledge then of okay, I know what they're going to be asking me, sort of speak on the exam, so I can kind of focus on this. And because the CCIEs are, you know yourself that they're a beast. There's a lot of if you look at the guides and what's required, there's a lot of stuff on there, and you never know what you're going to get. You just need to be sort of prepared for it. So I did that and failed, and I was happy with that. I sort of shared my attempt with the groups that I were in. I shared it, I think, on LinkedIn. I even made a YouTube video actually saying that I'd failed. And a lot of people don't really speak about failure, but for me, it's sort of, I like to use the expression of, fail fast, fail forward. And the reason I use that is because for me, failure is where you grow. And if anybody appears to be looking as though they're just sort of flying through and doing things, one time and not having any obstacles, it's definitely not true. It's they're just not sharing it. And for me, being a content creator as well, I felt it were important to share with people that, you know, behind all these successes that you're seeing, I'm getting these certifications. I've got, my 2 degrees, and, I've got really high results in them and everything else, my success in Cisco and stuff. I've been through a lot of failures. And I like to try and share those failures to let people know that, look, this is the reality of it. This is, you just don't, coming to do so, the CC. And I look at this, I do a lot of running, and last year I run a marathon, and I use the same approach in that all the work that you do is in the background. So all the training that I did for my marathon, on the cold nights, the cold mornings, alone, the rainy weather, everything, I did that alone. The 20 plus miles I'm running a day, nobody sees that. Nobody sees that. All they see is the end result when I get my medal and I finish my marathon, and everyone's there to celebrate and say congratulations. The marathon itself is just that's the fun part. That's the easy part,
Hmm.
because in the background I've already run, probably 4 times the marathon by the time, even more by the time I get to the marathon. That's where the hard work is, and nobody sees that.
Yeah.
The same's true with the technical side. Like I said to you, when I was in Krakow, spending my evenings every single day without fail, training and working towards certifications. Nobody saw that. I was in my apartment by myself, didn't really speak about it because it's not something you really need to speak about. I just did it. Nobody sees that, but what they see is then, I go and pass a certification the first time. And it's like, oh, wow, this guy's, amazing. They don't see all the effort that I put into it.
He's a
So for me,
genius.
exactly. And, you can call me that if you like. The point is, people don't see the work that goes on behind the scenes, and the same is true with the CCIE security. I spent a lot of time. I sacrificed a lot of time with my family. They went out and did whatever they were doing because I was just sat at my PC, 8, 12 hours a day, learning and labbing. On a weekend, then back to work and doing the same after I finish work, just to go and do then our exam, which should be then the easy part. So I wanted to share that, with anything in life, with certifications, especially the journey that I've been on. I wanted to make people aware that these things don't just come, they're not just given to me, they're not just handed to me. People like me also fail as well. And when you realize that, you're not going in with it, you're not then building an audience that sort of look at you and say, oh, wow, this guy can do it the first time, so can I. You're building an audience that understands the realism behind what needs to go into this stuff to actually achieve those results. And that's what I want, because I don't want, I'm sick of seeing things online where you've got a sponsored advert, or you've got somebody speaking on YouTube saying, get this in 2 weeks and start earning 6 figures. It's rubbish. It's absolute rubbish, and it's just false pretenses that people try and get into this stuff and realize that it's a lot more work. So for me, it was all about sharing those failures. Um, But after I did the first attempt, I did go for my second attempt of my CC.
Mm.
This time it was in London, and yeah, I did better. I was a lot quicker. Ran out of time again. Ultimately, obviously, if you run out of time, then you fail. I ended up failing, and because of all the sacrifice I'd already put into that, just wanted to, coming back to your point about, why have I done other certifications? I wanted to step out of the Cisco headspace for a little bit and just see
Mm.
what else is out there. I always knew that I always wanted to try and get the CISSP. So I decided, right, okay, the CISSP is also it's supposed to be a tough certification and really hard to get. And it's, really good if you do get that certification. And it's security related. So for me, it was like, okay, maybe I should start, just take a step back from the CCIE security and look at maybe trying to get the CISSP and then come back to the CCIE security. And when I sort of took that decision, I had a lot of people telling me not to do it because all the knowledge and time that I'd spent on the CCIE already, it was basically going to go to a loss because you start, what you don't use, you lose essentially.
Yeah.
But for me, I just needed to do it. I needed to first and foremost, build up skills outside of Cisco so that if it came to the point where, I was in another position where there was laying people off again, and I had to go and work for a company that didn't focus on Cisco solutions, then I needed to have that knowledge outside of Cisco as well. And just basically broaden my knowledge in security in general, rather than just being ingrained in the Cisco ecosystem. So I went for the CISSP, and it's a funny story actually. So I started studying for the CISSP, and then I was so much content with this CISSP, so much content. It's just ridiculously, like, the books are crazy. And
I heard that it's boring.
yeah, it depends how much you like dry subjects. So for me, for example, I quite like governance and, risk and, compliance, so
Mm.
GRC sort of stuff. And that's quite dry to a lot of people, but I quite like that. So for me,
Mm.
it wasn't really an issue. But I started studying for it, and then I realized that maybe I don't want to go down this road yet. And my one of my colleagues at the time, he said, "No, I'm doing it. Let's do it." And he took the exam. Yeah, he took the exam, and he got back to me. He's like, "Yeah, I did take the exam." He did. So he either took the exam and he passed it, and he got back to me, or he said he'd gone through the content. And I think he actually took the exam and he passed it. And I think that's what spurred me on to be like,
Mm.
"Oh, I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this certification." So we both started studying it when we was due to go to Cisco Live in Amsterdam, and we was actually on one of the stands presenting security technologies. So I thought, I'm not really going to get time to study here, but I took the CISP book and studied it again in my own time while I was there. That was February. I think by April I took the exam. When I went for the exam, I had to go to another town to take the exam because of availability. So I'd read the official CISSP book. I'd read it page to page, like literally read the book page to page, staying up till midnight again, doing what I always do, just being engrossed in the studies. I'd read that. I'd gone through practice exams. I, in fact, read another unofficial CISSP book as well, just to kind of get a different perspective. So I felt like I were in a good position, and I were ready. I was ready to do this exam. And so I set off. I drove to the location because I had to stay in the hotel the night before the exam. I was driving to this location, and I just didn't feel well. I started to get sick. Literally, as I was driving there, I started to get sick. I'm like, what's going on here? And by the time I got to the hotel, I was in a bad way. I had all my CSSP books. My plan was to study and, revise the night and then go to the exam in the morning. And by the time I got to the hotel, I was shivering. I was like cold sweats. I was just in a bad way. I just don't know what happened. And the only thing that I could do was either continue to try and revise and study for the exam in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
or just go to bed and try and hope that this is just an overnight thing, and it's, in the
Mm-hmm.
morning I'll wake up okay. And I just couldn't study, so I just kind of told myself, look, it is what it is. I'm either going to wake up in the morning and decide that I'm just not fit enough to even make it to the exam, or I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm still in a bad way. I've not studied like I was supposed to the night before, but let's just give it a try. I can make it to the exam, so let's try. So I woke up the next morning and I wasn't as bad as I was the previous night, but
Mm-hmm.
I still wasn't well. I wasn't in a good way. And I said to myself, well, I've come here. I can I can get up. I can walk. So as long as I can walk, I'll just wrap myself up. I can walk. I know where the exam is. So I walked to the testing center and I just said, what will be, will be. All I need to rely on now is I wasn't thinking straight because my mind was all foggy and, I just wanted to sleep essentially. I thought if I can make it there, give it a shot. I've got the knowledge. Well, I thought I had the knowledge. Let's just see what happens. All I have to do is sit through, 100 and I think a maximum of 125 questions, which is quite a lot to be honest. And the questions are really tough for the CISSP. But all I have to do is sit through this and just see what happens. And then if I don't make it, then I actually purchased a voucher with ISC Squared where if I fail my first attempt, I get the second attempt for free. So I kind of had that to lean back on as well. And I sort of went in there with that mindset as well. So I went through the exam. There was stuff circulating online where if you get to basically if you're doing well, you'll get less questions. If you're not doing too great, you might get more questions, but it's not guaranteed. You could be doing well and still get more questions.
Okay.
I was going through the exam. I got to question 100, and I thought, and you don't know when the exam's going to end. If you press next, it might continue, it might just end, and then
It
you don't
doesn't tell you the number of questions.
doesn't tell you. You literally just keep going until it basically stops you.
Okay.
And I got to question 100. I've still got time, but I've not got a lot of time. And I know that it's going to be a maximum potentially 125 questions if it goes past 100. Press next, and it continued. I thought, oh no. And then anyway, I'm continuing, and I can't remember if I got to full 125, but I did get, over 100. And again, it doesn't tell you if you've passed or not. And honestly, when the screen finished and it went off, I just wanted to get out of there, drive home, and just go to sleep. And obviously, I wanted to know my result, but I wanted to just sleep. And so I went out to the front desk where they print out the reports. And to make matters even worse, the guy printed out my form and he folded it backwards so I couldn't see the form. I'm just like, oh man, just tell me the result. And so as soon as I took the form off him, I turned it round, and it's not like the CIS or the IC squared stuff are not just like a you pass, congratulations, or pass. You literally have to read it to say, and so I'm reading it, and it said I passed, and I like honestly I didn't believe it at first. I thought I kind of put the sheet away. I walked outside, got some fresh air, then I opened it back up. Have I passed?
What?
So I looked at it and it said, yeah, provisionally passed the CISSP because you got to do some other requirements before you get the CISSP. And honestly, I was happy inside, but it wasn't like my usual jump for joy. It was just like, okay, I passed. I need to go home now and just
Yeah,
rest,
yeah.
so to speak.
Your mindset was in a different state.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't really get time to enjoy it, but I actually passed it, and yeah, I'm just fortunate that I was able to do it the first time round. And that was off the back. Actually, I did another certification with ISC Squared, which was their new certification at the time. It was an entry level one. It was certified in cybersecurity, and that was my first. I think that was my first real effort outside of the Cisco ecosystem that sort of led me there. But yeah, those are my reasons why, and that's the two main certifications outside Cisco, or at least I say the CISSP is the main certification outside of Cisco that I got.
Okay, so besides the Cisco consulting job you're doing now, you mentioned that you are kind of the entrepreneurship kind of there, doing some things, and you recently posted that you became a Cisco AI, let's put it that way, specialist. So, what are you doing right now? So let me just focus right now. What are you doing besides the Cisco job?
So right now, I am focused primarily on security and AI. Now, as you said, I've just taken so I did two actually. So Cisco got two new learning paths related to AI. Well, they've got more, but specifically AI. They've got a business focus one, and then they've got a technical focus one. So I started first with the new certification, which was released in December last year, so very new. It's called the Cisco AI Technical Technical Practitioner, and I went through the content for that, and yeah, then booked the exam and took the certification exam and passed that exam as well. So I did that a few weeks ago, and then after I passed that as well, I then went through the Cisco AI Business. I can't remember the exact name for it, but
Yeah, A B something.
yeah, I went through that training and then I completed that and got a little logo for it as well. So um, AI for me is a massive thing at the moment outside of security. I've been doing security now for I guess over 10 years, and AI, even though security is still equally as important, I think AI is literally changing the world. We're living in a time in the world now where this change is at this pace is maybe not going to be seen for some time now, and I'm trying to stay at the forefront of that by learning as much as I can about AI. And not only just because I want to be at the forefront, I actually enjoy and have found AI interesting from many years ago. I think I actually took a Microsoft AI certification. I did. I've got a Microsoft AI certification that I took many years ago before AI really
Okay.
became a big thing because I find it interesting. But the way that AI is moving at the pace it's moving, it's just give me more of a need to sort of focus on AI. And not only that, I've always had a barrier to being able to develop my ideas. And the reason being is because, excuse me, is I'm not a developer, never have been a developer, don't aspire to be a developer. So my ideas in sort of applications I want to build and things like that, they've always just met a dead end because I can't. I've never really been the coding type and stuff. I know about the different languages. I know the structure and stuff like that. But in terms of building an application, I've never really kind of put pen to paper and tried to do it. Now, for me, now AI opens up that ability for me to be able to do that. And since it's opened up that ability for me to do that, I've actually been learning more about coding, developing front ends, back ends, and AI in general, and also developing in general. And to this day, I've probably built now, at least with my ideas, I've probably built over 10 applications, personal and SaaS applications, to either benefit myself or to help others, and obviously earn some money from them as well. So I feel like it's opened up a big space for me where I can not only learn more but also monetize that and also make my life easier through building tools that help me be more productive, essentially.
Okay. Okay. So, Kelvin, if you were to share or recommend, like, to little Kelvin how to be at the position you are right now, what the roadmap would look like, or like what are the steps that this person would have to take? Like, if I want to become a Cisco consulting engineer, whether if something that it's available, or if I want to start, or I should start building apps using AI. Looking what the time we're living now, what you would recommend to someone who wants to excel in IT in today's age? What would it look like, the steps to take?
I think the person still needs to be passionate and they still need to enjoy what they do, because if you don't enjoy this stuff, then it's going to be really difficult to learn and apply your knowledge. And That's what I would say, first and foremost. It's not, don't just look at it from the perspective of, you can make a lot of money or you can build crazy applications. You need to enjoy what you're doing or it's not going to work. What I would say to the younger me is that you need to still start with getting a baseline level of networking knowledge. And for me, I swear by the CCNA because it's so broad, but it gives you such a good understanding about networks. And networks is a foundation of anything and everything. It's, without the network, there is no AI. Without the network, there is no security. So fundamentals in networking is always where I recommend anybody to start. Once you've got the networking, now, some people want to maybe get into a job straight away. And I would say that you need to evaluate, really what it is you want to do. Are you wanting to just stick with networking? Are you wanting to pivot into AI and security? For me, I always had the direction of networking first. So I would, tell myself, keep going. And then as soon as I started to learn more about security, I pivoted to security. So again, I'd follow that same exact track. One thing that I might do differently is whether I would get a degree or not. And there's been lots of talk about, a degree is still valuable or they're not valuable. I will absolutely fundamentally say that my degree has allowed me to get to where I am today. And I say that because the time was slightly different. A lot of positions now don't necessarily require a degree. So you can get into the workplace without a degree and maybe just a few certifications. But what I would sort of evaluate is whether the degree is required for the job or is the degree required because you want a degree. So for me, the degree, my undergraduate degree, was required for me to get my job, and I absolutely believe it's helped me get to where I am today. So even though I've had to pay for that degree, in my opinion, it was absolutely worth it for the job and for where I am today. When I did my master's degree, I didn't need to do my master's degree. In fact, a lot of the stuff I covered in my master's degree, I already knew, I had the knowledge of. I did that for personal reasons because I am the first person in my family, in my immediate family, brothers and, parents and stuff like that, to get a degree, let alone a master's degree. So for me, it was personal to show that we can do this, I can do this, and to set the bar essentially, so that my kids can now look up to me and say, wow, daddy, you got, to a master's degree. Let me do that too, let me go for that too. And who knows, I might do a PhD. I don't know yet. It's still something that I'm exploring. Regardless, even if I did the PhD, it's going to be more from a personal standpoint as opposed to professional. So what I say all that to say that at the time when I went through my struggles to doing the degree and working at the same time and everything else, if we was in a time like now where a lot of jobs don't necessarily require a degree now, they just require certifications and maybe experience and willingness, then I would maybe say to myself, okay, leave the degree for now, work on certifications, get those certifications that'll give you that knowledge in sort of the area that you want to work in, whether it's AI or security, and then go out there and get a job that doesn't require that. And then once you do get in there and get that sort of experience and start building that experience up, then what you can do is look at doing your degree from a personal level if you want to do that. So that's one thing that I'll probably change. Another thing that I would say is that AI is definitely. I still believe we're at the very start of it, so it's not too late to change. But what I would say is, once you've got that experience and you get into the workplace, then start to look at AI. If it's not security, security might not be you know the thing. I believe if it's my younger self, security would still be the thing. So what I would do is I'd still focus on security and AI combined rather than just security as I have done for the majority of my technical career. I'd focus on security and AI at the same time and sort of blend that knowledge in with, mix of certifications and stuff like that. Would I go for the CISSP, which is obviously the a really good certification. Absolutely, I'd still go for that because I believe the knowledge is broad. So I'd still aim to do that. Would I go for the CCNP security? Yes, I would still do that, especially if I were working with Cisco technologies. Would I do the CCNP enterprise that I have? Maybe not, because I am not really working in that area. I mean, it would be good to get that knowledge, that more advanced knowledge in networking in general. But unless I'm specializing in the networking side of it, I'd probably skip that one for now. I would focus purely on security and AI. Would I go for the CCI security? No. If I was being honest with my younger self right now, and I wasn't predominantly focusing on Cisco, let's say, I wouldn't go for the CCI security right now. And the reason I say that is because I know how much effort needs to be put into to get that. I know what's required of that. And I know right now there's probably changes that can need to be made on that exam to bring that up to more of a modern standard to kind of cover some of the more modern things that we're seeing and even security solutions that we have now. So I wouldn't focus on it, not because it's a bad certification. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I went for the certification twice. You know, I still want to get that certification. In fact, last week I was looking at trying to start again at retraining to get that certification. But what I am saying is that unless it's absolutely required for you, if there's, you know, you find value in the technologies that are covered on that exam right now, then I would rather spend my time focusing on more predominantly AI and security in general, ethics around AI, how that works, technologies, security technologies that we're using to help um, stop AI tools, let's say, for example, from breaching networks, or how are we helping protect organizations that are using AI, things like that, essentially. And because that's what's going to put me, my younger self, in a good stead for a universal platform, you know, not just the Cisco ecosystem, but, you know, a wider audience. My skill set is a lot broader, a lot wider, covering more generic and general security and AI. So for me, it's all about what I would say, you know, is to sort of summarize there. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, essentially.
Okay, so Kevin, I think that's a good place to stop, and I would like to appreciate you for taking the time.